The left likes to dismiss all of the corruption and ties between his son and various corrupt governments around the world. But you say the question Biden should be asked, and I quote, will Biden disclose any and all funding directly or indirectly emanating from Chinese sources for the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement? Explain that to me.
Yeah, well, first of all, to date, they haven't. The University of Pennsylvania in general has received millions of dollars in funding from Chinese sources. That Penn Biden Center talks about, again, this idea of continued cooperation with China, engagement with China, it views Russia as the primary enemy. So, again, you have to ask yourself, where is Biden on what I argue is the essential question of our time? Let's put this in context. China is the number one issue when it comes to national security and foreign policy for America. It is the number one threat, clearly, as we're seeing from the coronavirus, to the life and limb of our people and their liberty. And Biden has been out to lunch on this for more than 40 years. So, again, the question of the corruption and the corruption of foreign sources of money in particular is essential here because, of course, Biden was going over to China, serving as the Obama administration's point man, while at the same time his son Hunter Biden was gaining entree to investment opportunities in China that no other American was gaining entree to. And so you have to ask, follow the money and then look at the man's positions. And that's why you have to ask the question, disclose all the sources of
Yeah.
funding for the Biden Center.
Well, yeah, after Hunter Biden got that $1.5 billion equity deal with Chinese companies that are obviously tied to the Chinese Communist Party, Joe Biden, who was vice president at the time, his positions on China, whether it was the South China Sea, intellectual property theft, or trade, softened. It's impossible to say that there wasn't something between the two. It's too odd of a coincidence. This is another question you say that Biden should be asked. Would a President Biden explicitly encourage U.S. companies to move their supply chains out of China? And this is such a pertinent question for, the era of COVID-19 too.
Yeah, and it even predates it. I allude in the article to a tweet from President Trump where he talked about saying U.S. companies should move out of China explicitly in a tweet. No U.S. president would have ever considered doing that before Donald Trump, which is why I would argue that this is his greatest contribution on the national security and foreign policy side. It's the total reorientation of U.S. China policy away from the Biden view of engagement, integration, appeasement. Why is it so critical that we have supply chains moved away from China? Obviously, it's been made quite clear by the fact that we are now dependent on China for all sorts of basic necessities of American life. But more broadly, it comes down to the fact that by having our supply chains run through China, it gives it leverage over us. That leverage is power and influence. And ultimately, that's what China wants. China wants to be the most powerful and influential power in the world so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive, grow its power, and act as it wishes. And that would be devastating to the American people.